Welcome to the CCFR Radio Podcast, your source for news, updates, and stories from the CCFR.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 151 of the CCFR Radio Podcast. I'm your host, 𝐷 𝐂𝐂𝐅𝐑. Thanks for joining me again. Today on the show, we got tons of stuff to go through as usual. The CCFR is launching a new project. I have all the details for you, so it's kind of exciting here in the podcast. I'm going to get to those right away. Right after we thank our sponsors, as we usually do, I'm going to get right into the new project, so I won't make you wait, okay? And we also have an update on our court case, CCFR versus Canada. I kind of scrolled that along the bottom of the last podcast because we'd recorded the podcast already and our TV show, and we hadn't talked about it yet. I got that news when I was editing, so I did stick that down there, but we're going to talk a little bit more about it. And I've been called to testify at the Senate. And we're going to talk a little bit about the scenario there. It's going to be a little bit interesting, and hopefully they don't kick me out or whatever, but we'll see. Anyway, we're going to talk about all that stuff. But first, I want to thank the sponsors of the CCFR Radio Podcast. Bullseye North stocks a wide variety of guns, ammo, optics, knives, and accessories from all the big brands and offers free shipping nationwide on orders over $200. Some conditions apply. Sign up for their weekly newsletter to get zeroed in on their weekly deals and live inventory. Bullseye North is your sports shooting superstore. A huge thank you goes out to our great friends over at the Saskatchewan Rivers chapter of Safari Club International. They do a lot of great work over there, including supporting the CCFR and the CCFR Radio Podcast. Check out all their great work at saskriverssci.com. That's saskriverssci.com. CTOMS has been a provider of trauma care training to military and police in Canada for nearly 2 decades. Now this emergency medical training is being made available to a wider audience through CTOMS Academy online courses. This online training is valuable to anyone that pursues sporting or outdoor activities or finds value in being prepared for a crisis. Visit ctomsacademy.skillbuilder.co and use promo code CCFR30 for a 30% discount on all training. And thank you so much to our great friends over at Vortex Canada. They continue to support the CCFR podcast and the CCFR. Can't say enough about them. Check out all their great products at vortexcanada.net. That's vortexcanada.net. Vortex, the force of optics. All right, we are back. So, as promised, we're going to get into the CCFR's new project right now. So, it is a reboot or an update of our Scrap C21 campaign. And it's a campaign designed for the Senate process that Bill C-21 is in right now. So if you remember, it was in the House. There was a couple of votes. There was a committee process. Remember all those great videos with at the 𝐥𝐞𝐦𝐛𝐞𝐫 committee, right? We got a lot of content out of that, right? And then it was made its way over to the Senate. The Senate is going to do the same committee process, very similar, and the senators are going to have some debates amongst themselves in their chamber, and then they're going to wrap that bill up with some amendments or recommendations or whatever they think. It's going to go back to the House. The House will probably jettison all of those. They'll ignore all of those things and send it to become law to the Governor General to receive royal assent. That process is called. So anyway, what our effort right now is we want to slow that bill down. We also want the senators to get real information, right? It's amazing. The anti-gun people, they're all like, oh, there's disinformation. It's like, yeah, it's coming from you guys, right? Because I'll always sit down and say, here's the evidence, and I'll debate this with you. They won't do it because they spread disinformation. So we're going to do everything that we can to get the Senate to hear our message and hear the message of gun owners, the people that are losing the property that they are debating about, okay? We are primary stakeholders. So we want to make sure that the CCFR is able to project that message to senators, make them think about what they're doing a little bit, hopefully change their minds if they needed to be changed, or just give them more to think about. So we want to slow the bill down. We want to get the Senate on our side, which may or may not be possible. Fair enough. And we also want to raise awareness. So this is a reboot, an update of our Scrap C21 project. So again, the website at scrapc21.ca has been redone. There's some videos on there. There's a new letter writing campaign, an email campaign, a phone call campaign, and there's also a new poster campaign. Now, if you think back to the Scrap C21 original project, and if you've watched the podcast before or even the TV show, I said before that I think the poster aspect of it is what really scared the Liberals when they ended up, like we rolled that out 5 days later after we rolled. And remember, those amendments were floating around for 2 months. We rolled out our Scrap C21 campaign, which had a bunch of different aspects to it. But 5 days later, they withdrew the amendments, right? And again, don't ever get me wrong. I'm not claiming responsibility for that. I'm not claiming that we did that. But I'm sure that we helped, okay? And one of the biggest thing I think that helped, there was the letter writing and all the rest of that stuff, and the social media campaign was great. But I think it was the posters. Because when we created informational posters with the page numbers that you can look all this stuff up yourself in the amendments, and we sent them all over the country, the Liberals don't have, if you're having a debate with them on TV, they can just run right over you, right? Because they own the media. When there's a poster hanging that hundreds, if not thousands of people are seeing in ranges and gun stores across the country, they can't respond to that. They can't be like, yeah, don't listen to this. That's disinformation, right? They can't do that. And that's real information that people can look up. So it's very powerful. So another aspect of this new rebooted version of scrapc21.ca for the Senate is that we have created new posters. Now, in the original project, we were going to send out the poster packs to the first 50 gun stores or shooting clubs that requested them, and we got 300 requests in the span of a couple of days. And I told Tracy, because she was filling those orders, I said, fill them all, right? Because it's really not that expensive, right? Fill them all. And I don't know how many we got out, but right away they withdrew those amendments within like literally days of sending out those first few posters. And I think we probably sent out about 100 of them, 100 poster packs. So anyway, we're doing that again. Now the new poster is a little more wordy, but it is meant to be an informational source, so that you can read what the Liberals did and also what the Liberals tried to do and how you can fight them. So that's really important information, especially for people, maybe older Canadian gun owners that aren't on the internet or whatever, get all their news and information from the old TV, right? So which is awful. So anyway, we're going to be sending out, I think it's 5 posters or more. I have to figure out what those numbers were. The site is updated. You'll find that on the website, scrapc21.ca. For ranges, we're going to send out a collection of posters, and for gun stores, I think we're sending 2 posters out. And again, this is completely free. Compliments of the members and supporters of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. So go to your gun store, say, hey, Joe, did you request your free posters from the CCFR, and will you post them so your customers can know what is going on, what the government is doing, and what they try to do. Same thing with your gun club. Call your executive, say, email the CCFR right now and request posters. If you are one of those people, a gun store owner or a range executive, make sure that when you contact us, you give us the proper mailing address and a contact name to where it's going to. So the club, contact name, mailing address, and we'll send that to you for free. And make sure that you put those posters up in your ranges. Again, this is the way the CCFR rolls. There's nothing on the poster that talks about the CCFR. If you're a club that's insured by another organization, you're like, well, I can't put CCFR propaganda up in my club. It's like, that's stopping you from spreading information about Bill C-21 and what we can do to fight it. So there's no CCFR stuff on the posters at all, even when you go to scrapc21.ca, because this is for the whole community. It's not tribalism here. We're trying to fight the government, and that's not easy. So when you go there are a couple of videos, and in one of them, I identify myself as who I am, with the CCFR. But that video is for senators. I'm going to tell you about that video in a second. But everything else, I'm not talking about the CCFR. There's an about page on the website where you can see the work that we do, but that's it. There's no logos or anything, all on all the pages that describe what you can do to fight C21. Okay. So also, I've created, speaking of the video for senators, for the new letter writing campaign and emailing campaign and calling campaign too, we give you all the information and contact everyone who's on SEC-D, which is their equivalent to the Public Safety Committee. We're asking you to ask the senators, hey, reconsider this bill. reject it in its entirety because it's not going to help public safety. And specifically, we have a problem with the handgun ban. The handgun ban is immoral. It is an irrational, inappropriate use of government power. It has no demonstrable positive effect on public safety. And I've created a video, I think it's around 19 minutes long, where I explain this in detail with evidence on screen for senators. It is imperative that the senators specifically, and most importantly, who are on the 𝐥𝐞𝐬𝐡 committee, they need to watch that. And I'd like to think that they would, because I'd like to think that a senator that's pulling down the money and the prestige that they do will take 19 minutes to figure out why 100,000 gun owners are angry about this. I would like to think that that's true. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do. Then when I get there, and we'll talk about, I have been requested to go testify, and I will, obviously. Then when I get there, I won't have that 19 minutes to explain why this handgun ban is a complete misuse of government power, and that it's terrible, right? It's morally wrong. So this is my chance to make sure that they've got this. So we can submit briefs, but senators don't always read the briefs, right? And they're all written. So we're going to make it very easy for them to understand what our position is. So that's part of it too. So we've got the new posters, we've got the video for senators, we've got the letter writing campaign. All this stuff has to be done. It has to be done quickly. So what we're primarily asking you to do is write 12 letters, and it's going to cost, and no postage required. It's going to cost you 12 envelopes, 12 pieces of paper. And we're telling you right there on the site, like how to write. This is what you should write in the letter. Here's what you want to express yourself. And it only has to be a few sentences. And ask them to watch that video at scrapc21.ca. And it's labeled C21 for senators. That's it. Okay. So if we can get a few thousand, if not 50,000 letters sent to the Senate, cover their desks in letters again, and get them to really take a minute to listen to why we're upset about this and why this is a bad choice. Okay, so that's the project. So there's a little bit to do for everybody there. I also want to inform you about this. We have already launched our election project. So I talked about it before that we started, and we started, I think, about 7 or 8 months ago, because our plan is to have an updated brochure, the election brochures that we did, and a few other tricks that we have up our sleeve. But that project is actually really big. There's a lot to do there. And I'm just trying to, I'm stopping because I'm figuring out how much I should say. But anyway, let's just say there's a lot of work to be done, and we've already started that. We've even brought in some other people to help us with it. So we will have a very comprehensive election project to roll out in very short notice, because the election period, the election period in Canada is very short. It's like 5 months at the most, I believe, or 5 weeks, pardon me. So it's like a month and a half, and it's very hard to respond to a call from an election call in that kind of time frame. So we're actually working on that a lot, and it's going to be quite impressive when that happens. And there's a lot of moving parts there. So we've already launched that. And I'm going to tell you this too, and it's going to suck because I'm telling you about a project that we're doing that I can't tell you about. It's a secret project, and I will only tell you about it after it's been done. There's a variety of reasons for that, but we're actively working on another project right now. And let's just say this, I will tell you this, because the goal of the project. At the end of the day, if you want to save your guns, here's your options, okay? And blurting out a bunch of rhetoric about how you're not going to accept liberal gun control on your Twitter feed or your Facebook group that's not work, okay? It's rhetoric. The boots on the ground, how do you stop this gun control? Right now, you have to get the liberals out of power. You have to slow bills down if there's bills going through, because if a bill is still in progress, let's say we slow Bill C-21 down. This is really important for you guys to know. Let's say we slow that bill down. It doesn't even get passed by Christmas, and it actually has to go, to the middle of January for it to receive royal assent. Any bills that haven't received royal assent, they're still in the legislative process. If there's an election called, that bill's gone. Like, there still is an opportunity to stop Bill C-21 in that if there's an election call, there's some big scandal, and the NDP decide they're not going to hold up this maniacal lunatic, Trudeau and the rest of the lunatics in the Liberal Party, if they're not going to hold that up, Bill C-21 is gone. So anything that delays bills or anything that makes it so that the Liberals and the NDP do not have any power in Canada, political power in Canada, that's how you save your guns. Like, that's just the reality of it. I don't make the rules. I'm just playing by them. So this project is going to go a long way in making sure the Liberals don't get reelected with specific demographics that elected them a majority back in 2015. Okay? So take that for what you will. I know it's not the nicest thing for me to say there's a project, but I can't tell you about it. But I'll tell you, we are working day and night to get rid of this government as soon as humanly possible, because that's the only way we're going to save our guns. So I just want to let you know there's a lot more going on than you're seeing right now. And you can trust us on that, in that regard, because we do work. By the way, if you go to ccfr.ca or firearmrights.ca, if you're ever wondering, like when I say we do work and you want to know everything that we've done, and longtime listeners will know this already, go to our website, click Why Join, or you can go to Scrap C21 and click About. There's an updated list there, and you can see everything that we've done in the last 3.5 years. Now, on Scrap C21, it's only the stuff we've done in the last 3.5 years, not stuff we did 5-8 years ago, stuff that we've done since the May 2020 gun ban. Okay, and look down that list and see the stuff that we've done. We are working our butts off to get rid of this government. And you know what? We're going to get rid of this government. Now, I didn't want to spend as much time in the monologue as I am spending right now, but this is all important stuff for you to know. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the NDP just had their convention. And it's not going well for the NDP, right? They are millions. I thought they had paid off all of their previous election debts, expenditure debts that they had from the previous election, but apparently they haven't. There's still millions of dollars in debt. They can't afford an election, but at the same time, they're getting no results for their members, right? So the latest thing to come out of their NDP convention was they want national pharmacare, $11 billion a year in more deficit spending, or they're going to dissolve their agreement with the Liberals to support their government. And a bunch of the NDP people said, well, it's a hollow threat if we aren't willing to actually call an election. And it's like, well, that's weird. You can't afford an election. You're probably going to lose seats in an election. The Liberals will be gone. You'll be nobodies. You'll have no influence at all. The Conservatives are riding high in the polls. They're looking at a solid majority government. And so I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff. Politics is really in upheaval in Canada right now. But the good news is that the NDP are unhappy. And the best news is it looks like the Conservatives would ride to a majority government. And that's what we've been waiting for. Okay, that is our ticket to start working with them to roll the stuff back. Okay, and who knows what's possible there. Especially this time around, right? There was no CCFR when there was a Conservative majority before, was there? There's a CCFR now. So who knows what's possible if we are able to work with the government and help them achieve good results for licensed, law-abiding, honest, hard-working Canadian gun owners. So anyway, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, politics is a mess in Canada, but there's a lot of reasons to be really enthusiastic. And we've got some great stuff coming up to push our community towards those goals. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about in the monologue. Sorry it was so long, like 16 minutes or something. But thanks for hanging in there with me. And let's get Tracy on the Skype. All right, via Skype, we've got Tracy Wilson of the CCFR. Wilson!
There it is, 𝐂𝐂𝐅𝐑.
There it is. What's a good word?
Oh, just another beautiful day here in the nation's capital.
In the nation's capital, otherwise known as Mordor for you, Lord of the Rings fans.
Exactly.
Okay. We have a ton of stuff to go over. Mm-hmm. So let's get started. The first thing we want to talk about is our court case, CCFR versus Canada. And so we got a little bit of an update from the judge that we will have a decision at the end of the month.
Yeah, that's right. So it just came just after the last time we recorded, so we didn't get to include it in the show. But we did hear from Justice Kane. She did say her decision, her ruling in our case should be delivered by month's end. So I think all Canadian gun owners will be sitting on the edge of their seat waiting for that decision, and it is impending. So, yeah.
That's very exciting. And, we talked last time about the amnesty extension that the government said they were going to do. It's funny because there's a court process with our injunction application. And part of that is cross-examination of the affiants. And there's a process there. It's injunctions can be expensive. And the government said they were extending this, but yet we haven't seen anything pop up in the Gazette to say that they actually did, only some notice on Canada.ca.
Yeah, that's right. So when you go to Canada.ca/public safety, there's the announcement there on the government website, which is not law. The Canada Gazette has not been updated, so it has not been gazetted. And the RCMP Canadian Firearms Program also has not been updated. So although there's an announcement of an extension, it has not been extended. And in fact, the government has submitted affidavits basically saying, see, we said we're going to extend it and you guys kind of accepted that, but yet they haven't actually extended it. So I don't know. It's a little strange, but we'll keep everyone up to date on what's happening with that.
Yeah, it's pretty weird, but we'll keep our eye on that. All right.
Yes.
Next thing, Brian Pasifim from the National Post wrote an interesting story a little while back, and I think it was a couple of weeks. And it had to do with the influence that anti-gun groups have over the Liberal government. And I guess what he had done is he'd filed some ATIPs, so we got those, and there's a lot of really interesting things in there. And then we also had Poly, who's one of the groups that have this influence, massive influence, same thing with the Doctors Against Legal Gun Owners. They have a lot of influence with the Liberal government. And then the implication that they lost their minds. Anyway, tell us about the story a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. So he had filed a whole bunch of ATIPs to get the email communications between Polysesouvient and the Liberal government. And he's, the National Post Parliament Bureau reporter. This is what he does. And he wrote a story called Disinvitation from Polytechnique Group Sent Trudeau Government into Damage Control Mode. And basically what he discovered from this series of ATIPs was, you'll remember a couple of years back, when the Liberals had said they were going to ban these guns, but they were still talking about a buyback being optional. You could either keep your firearms or you could participate in this buyback, and they wanted it mandatory. He was kind of wavering on that, so they disinvited him from their annual memorial to commemorate the tragedy from December 6th. And next thing you know, he made it mandatory. So it kind of showed the pull they've got, despite them being absolutely used and abused on this issue. But that stack of email ATIPs is really interesting. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Mendocino sort of avoiding meeting with them. They developed a bunch of different ways of messaging and had to pick and choose which ones to send to Polly to, pat them on the head and keep them satisfied. And I've been apparently living rent-free in their heads because I appear all through their emails in their communications with public safety. So I'm going to, up on our website, actually at ccfr.ca, I've put the link to a Google Doc that has all of those emails, all those ATIP results. That's all public information, and I think everybody should be entitled to it. So, on a Saturday morning, if you've got some time, make a coffee and sit down and read through that stuff. There's some really interesting stuff in there.
It's pretty scary. It's and as I mentioned in the outset, it was just interesting how bent out of shape they got over that story about anyone implying that they had any relationship with the Liberals, right?
Well, and I think too, it's, the thought of using their memorial on December 6th as sort of leverage or, weaponizing it against the Prime Minister to get what they want, which is exactly what they did, looks pretty bad on them. So I think they were pretty insulted. They did their usual thing where they write a whole document to try and, argue with the story and try and discredit it. But they're literally ATIPs. It's information and it's their words and emails. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Polly, because They are a very interesting group to watch. I'm choosing my words carefully, but yeah, they've been a little bit more unhinged lately. Although I think I feel like I say that at least once every 2 months. But looking at their Twitter feed, they posted this tweet talking about assault weapons again, of course, and they post this picture with an AR-15 and blood at a mass shooting in the United States to affect the way people view these firearms and Canadian gun culture here in Canada. And, you know, it's just, sometimes I wonder where maybe they should be advocating in the United States, right?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because they're, they absolutely have lost this battle on what they call assault style firearms, which they even have been going nuts trying to justify using that terminology. But they wrote a tweet and it says, to be clear, this is talking about the amnesty extension. This means that over 90,000 AR-15s can remain in private hands in Canada for another 2 years. These and tens of thousands of other semi-automatic #assault weapons. And they tag LeBlanc and they tag Trudeau. And it's sort of like, doesn't that tell you something in itself? That if these guns that are too dangerous to own, they're weapons of war or whatever the Liberals called them, and they've called them, they're so dangerous, but yet here they are sitting in the safes and gun rooms of Canadians across the country and nothing's happened. So much so that we're just going to keep on keeping them for years on end. Like, I don't know. It's just like they start to defeat themselves in their arguments a lot of times.
Well, they do. They undermine their own credibility on a very reliable and on a regular basis. But anyway, and then they continue on. I guess they don't like us criticizing them for using the term assault weapon. So they've got a variety of other tweets. You know, they're dragging up old magazine covers saying, look, they're called assault weapons. We're right. You're wrong. You know, it's just, they're a funny group.
Well, yeah, they often quote Ralph Brown and a couple of the other usual suspects saying, oh, here, somebody 37 years ago or 67 years ago in this magazine ad used the term assault weapon. It's totally normal. And it would be funny if it wasn't so ridiculous and such a waste of resources and effort.
Yeah, and it's disinformation. It's doing exactly the same thing that they accuse everyone else of doing. Even the government doesn't call them assault weapons, by the way.
No, they call them ASFs, assault style firearms.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. The next thing we want to talk about is there's been a controversy over a rifle that was legally imported into Canada called the Tavor Micro. So that's a centerfire semi-automatic magazine-fed rifle from Israel. And a lot of people have Tavors or IWI products, so Tavors or the X95. And this one was called the Micro with a short barrel. So if you have a centerfire semi-automatic rifle, it to have a barrel less than 18.5 inches or it's restricted. It can't be non-restricted. Right. So these were restricted firearms. The government knows who has them. These firearms come along with a registration certificate, and they were declared prohibited by the RCMP, and revocation notices, notices to turn in the firearm were sent to all the registered owners. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, it's my understanding that what happens when there's going to be a new gun, the importer or the distributor has a verifier, and that verifier fills out the information. Here's all the details and stats on this new gun. They send it forward for classification to the RCMP. It's assigned to classification. It's, okay, no problem. Let's bring them in, start selling them, send them out to retailers who in turn sell them to consumers. The problem is once the RCMP lab actually gets their hands on the physical firearm and does a physical inspection, they realize that the information wasn't entirely accurate from the verifier, or at least that's the way I understand it to go. And therefore, these are actually prohibited, not restricted. So, I know it's terrible when this happens, but it appears to me when I review this that it's not necessarily the RCMP that made the mistake here. So yeah, there's supposed to be some announcements or statements coming forward on this, but I have yet to find any. So yeah, it's a real tough time for people who bought them.
Yeah. So apparently, people are upset about it. Absolutely. They bought a rifle they thought was just restricted and was completely legal. But it's my understanding that the receivers themselves were made from full auto receivers.
Yeah.
And they're just like, I had that same experience when I had a CZ858 back in the day when those were prohibited. And I remember when that happened, there were threads out there on firearm forums of why they were prohibited. So if you looked into the receiver in my CZ858, where I guess the full auto trigger group would have needed accommodation inside the receiver, there was a steel block that was welded into that area that you would have to mill out in order to restore that receiver to make it able to accept the full auto trigger group again. So even though, that's as permanent as the receiver being blocked in there when it was originally made, it still qualifies as a converted full auto and thus prohibited. And that's been very clear in Canada for 30 years. You can't have converted full auto receivers being made into semi-autos and then those firearms being imported into Canada. So
which doesn't mean that we agree with that, but that is the way it is. So those are legitimately prohibited.
Well, the converted full auto thing is I don't know, that it's complicated, right? But it is kind of ridiculous in a way, because if it's equivalent to the firearm being produced originally, why do you just want to make things more expensive and more difficult? But anyway, whatever. All right, moving on. Really a tragic story, but definitely a story that makes you think. There's a Grizzly attack and 2 people lost their lives in that attack. And I don't know the details. I know that you know them. So why don't you take us through it?
Yeah, I was reading about this story actually, and it's super tragic. A husband and wife team were attacked by a grizzly and mauled to death. And at the scene of the crime, so to speak, there was an empty bear spray can found at the scene. And, my mind wanders. I read a lot, so I have a good imagination. And I can only imagine what happened, how horrific it would be, right? And you think about it, maybe one's being attacked and the other one's trying to defend them with the can of bear spray. And it's, a grizzly bear, a mature grizzly bear can be 600, 1,000 pounds, bigger even, right? And this is a massive, strong, raging animal. A can of bear spray, you are so inadequately set up to defend your life that you are pretty much doomed. So, tragic story, but sort of speaks to the need for wilderness carry. And I think, all the reasons, all the public safety reasons why we shouldn't are out the window. I mean, it's, we absolutely should be able to carry a small firearm that we would be able to use to protect our life. It may not save you, but it sure give you a hell of a fighting chance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it does. It does present an opportunity to kind of talk about those things, to carry a shotgun around or to carry a lever action, it's cumbersome. And certainly if you're not carrying it in your hand, it's not going to do you a whole lot of good. And it would be good if you had a 45 or even a 40 Smith & Wesson semi-automatic handgun. If you had that on your hip, you could draw it and you could shoot, especially, and I know we're getting into the details, which is not my intention, but even in close quarters where you don't have a lot of reaction time, you can let a couple of shots off and maybe you get two or three in the bear's face or whatever at the last second. And maybe that's enough force for the bear to change its mind or to try to figure out what's going on. And I carry I hike a lot. I carry bear spray. Never had to use it, so I don't even know if it works, but I got something. That's all I can do. But when you think of in terms of these 2 people lost their lives, they may or may not would have wanted to wilderness carry. But the thing is, you have to have a compelling reason why that's not appropriate. And I can't think of any public safety reason why you couldn't wilderness carry a registered handgun in Canada for any reason out in the bush. And that's not to say that, you should be carrying a 44 Remington Magnum revolver, in downtown Toronto just because in case there's grizzlies. Like we're talking wilderness carrying in areas where you could legally and safely discharge firearms. And so everywhere in the country, people know where those areas are because they go out there to shoot and stuff. So, and even hunting, bow hunters are probably the best example. Bow hunters should be able to carry a handgun because they don't have full use of their hands if they're hunting. And at the last second, at least you got something. So I don't know. It's one of those things where I think the opposition to it is purely ideological, right?
I think
It's
so
just
too.
like, well, we just can't do that, because then people might think, well, maybe I have the right to defend myself, and you know what? Maybe guns are a good way to do that. Maybe if I have a right to defend myself, owning guns starts looking like a right, and that's the thin edge of the wedge that all of these anti-gunners and these elites, that keeps them up at night. So, you know.
Oh, yeah. I would assume even this podcast will be quoted like, look at them. Look at what they're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that people should have an opportunity to fight for their lives. Sorry.
Me too.
Yeah, I know.
I think people are worth it.
I know that makes me a long list of bad things, but unfortunately, that's
Bunch
just the
of
way I
ifs.
see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, if it saves one life, it could have saved two.
It could have
Right?
saved two.
If it saves one life, it's worth it, isn't it? I thought that was what we were confronted with all the time.
That's the standard.
Yeah. Anyway, whatever. Sad story. All right. Moving
sad.
on to our last item. So I have been called to testify in front of the Senate for Bill C-21, so that's good.
Yes,
The
very good.
CCFR and the somewhere around 100,000 people that we represent will have a voice there, so that's great. I don't know when it's going to happen. It could happen in the next couple of weeks or the next few weeks, because we don't know yet how many meetings they're going to have.
Yeah, it's unclear how many. I think they're only going to be meeting once a week, but yeah, it'll carry on for some time.
Yeah. So, the interesting thing was I think my appearance at the at SECU in the House of Commons was a little strange. If we all remember that, we've seen enough clips from that. In fact, there was so much content there. We've been dragging that through the podcast and the TV show for like a year almost.
Oh, yeah.
It was like
Your friend
last
Lee.
November, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know what it's going to be like in the Senate. But I did look up what the Senate makeup was, because I looked at the committee and there's only 2 conservatives in there. And the rest are ISG, so Independent Senators Group, which is basically the Liberals. And then there's a couple of other groups, Progressive Senators Groups or something like that. But there's only 2 conservatives. I'm like, how come only 2 conservatives on this panel? Well, get this. So I looked up at the makeup of the Senate. And basically the way it sits today, senators that were appointed by 𝐥𝐿, there are 5 left out of 105. Senators appointed by Harper, I keep wanting to say approved, but appointed by Harper, 24, and Trudeau has appointed 61 of them. And that's a total of 90 that are currently sitting out of 105 possible seats of senators. So
That's one thing I will always be upset with former Prime Minister Harper for. And that was leaving so many empty seats in the Senate. Because, Trudeau's just been going nuts filling them, and with 15 still empty, I would imagine he's going to get busy because he knows his days are numbered.
Oh, yeah. And at the last minute, he'll appoint Heidi Rathjen as a senator, and Najma Ahmed and Frank Graves, right? From
This sounds
the
horrible,
Ecos
like a
polling
nightmare.
guy, who, in my opinion, is a complete lunatic. If you just look at the stuff he says, he's just terrible. Yeah, Bernie Faber from the Canadian
probably,
Hate Network.
yeah. Why not?
Oh yeah, Heather Malik from the Star. You've seen her stuff. Just like we're talking off the rails. We're talking burning condominium type of journalist, right? So
Yeah.
anyway, those are probably that's going to be the legacy as Trudeau probably stacks the
If he
Senate
does
on his way
that,
out.
I'm going to rent like a big circus tent and just have it installed right over the Senate chamber.
Yeah. Oh man, I could make so many jokes right now, but I don't think we're going to do that. So, all right,
Okay.
I think we've covered everything.
We did it.
We did it.
We made it through.
All right, awesome. Thanks for the update, and we will see you in the next one.
All right. We'll see you then.
Okay, it's been a long episode, but I still have a couple of things I got to go over with you before I let you go. I've got a great announcement to make, and I also have a bit of a health update. So the big announcement is more important. It's for FO of the month, CCFR Field Officer of the month, and for the month of September, it is Gord Lamoureux. So congratulations, Gord. You may be aware that you get a $100 gift code to the online store, promo code. to the online store. You also get a 1-year subscription of CATF, Canadian Access to Firearms, for free. So thank you, Donovan. Great friend of the CCFR over at CATF. We really appreciate you providing that for our Field Officers of the Month. And of course, you get recognized in our nationally broadcast television show, CCFR Radio on the Air, on WOW TV, and on the podcast. So thanks so much for your work, Gord. And I just want to say something about Gord before I move on. So when the CCFR was created by a handful of people who were the original directors and then a few volunteers, I think, I don't know, somewhere like June 2015, about 8 years ago, right? Well, over 8 years ago now. This group of people created it. I wasn't a part of that group of people. I was recruited maybe a month or two after to be the first president of the CCFR. I think I came on maybe in August-ish. And then by October the 30th, if memory serves me, or maybe the 28th, I'll have to check, we took our first membership. And that's actually a really interesting story, the number one membership story. Maybe I'll tell it in the next podcast because that'll be closer to our birthday, right? So anyway, I was out in Vancouver building what I had to build for the organization, and everyone else was primarily in Ontario, and then we were building people out around the rest of the country. So I had never physically met anybody, field officers or the directors or anybody, right? So anyway, fast forward to June of 2016, right? That June of the next year was our first AGM. So I flew out from the Lower Mainland of Vancouver, the Fraser Valley, really where I live, out to Ottawa for the AGM, and I met my first field officers. First field officers I ever met were Gord Lamoureux and James Bullreese, who picked me up and took me to an event we were appearing at, and it was the Podcasters Charity Shoot is where it was, in some town around an hour. I think it was an hour out of Ottawa, something like that. It was a long time ago. But those were the first field officers. Gord has been with us for the whole time. And so I often think about volunteers and what they're doing. Like, we're all adults, we're all busy, we have families and jobs and things, and some of us might even want to shoot a gun once in a while. That would be nice. But people carve off time out of their busy lives to forward the projects and the efforts of the CCFR, not only just for themselves as a gun owner, and not just for the CCFR. They're doing that, and it's benefiting all gun owners, whether or not they're supporters of the CCFR. And that's I really appreciate that. I think about that stuff a lot, right? So So it's the first field officer that I ever met really was those two guys, but one of them was Gord. So thanks so much, Gord, for all your effort. We have a lot of people that were part of that original group still today, so it's very inspiring. Anyway, all right. So congratulations on your stuff and all your great efforts, Gord. Now the health update. I don't usually like to talk about my personal stuff because it's not why you guys are watching this. But some of you know that I had cancer again a couple of years ago, throat cancer, and was treated for that and whatnot. And some people have been asking some other people, which has gotten back to me, that people have noticed that looks like I've lost a lot of weight recently, and some people were worried about that. So, don't worry. You got nothing to worry about. So far, I don't know that anything's come back. With cancer, you don't know. All you know is that you're okay for now. And that's the way it goes the rest of your life, basically, right? But the weight loss is intentional. About 80 days ago, I changed the way that I was eating, and I went on, I started kind of a different lifestyle. I'm training, and basically I lost 25 pounds in the span of about 5 or 6 weeks. And then my health is actually excellent. I'm trying not to say too much about it, right? But I've been training, and my cardiovascular training and everything else is where I was when I was like in my early 30s. So contrary to what it might look like, I'm actually doing excellent. So thank you all for your concern. I really appreciate it. The weight loss is intentional. And maybe in a CCFR sidebar, if you remember that video that I made a while ago, I was going to do just the personal stuff off to the side. Maybe I'll tell you about what I did, but it's changed my life. Like literally in the entire span of my life, that's the most dramatic change that ever happened, is the program that I went on about 80 days ago. And I've been looking a little silly lately because all my clothes, like this This shirt was too tight for me to wear. This is an old shirt way back from the Civil Advantage days that I had, and I couldn't wear it because it was too tight. Now it looks like it's falling off me, right? But anyway, I'm getting some new shirts, I promise you. So thanks for your concern. Everything's great. I'm doing better than ever as far as I know, and I appreciate it. Okay, last thing I'm going to say before I let you go is scrapc21.ca. We put a lot of effort into that, into the videos, into the program, into the posters, and mailing them out, and all the rest of that stuff. We really need your help. So make sure that you do your part. Send those 12 letters, and the first 12 sent. If you go to the website, all this is explained, right? But we want you to send 12 letters. And those are the 12 people that are on the SecD Public Safety Committee, basically at the Senate. And then if you want to continue and do the balance of the 90, that would be awesome. 90 pieces of paper, 90 envelopes. Same letter, just print it out and sign it individually. Maybe even address it to each individual senator. Great. Send that stuff out, really important. And get them to watch the video. See Bill C-21 for senators. Really important that we do that. I explained that all in the intro. I'm not going to say all that stuff again. But make sure you ask all your buddies to go to scrapc21.ca. Do those things. Make sure you go to your gun club and tell the executive to order those posters. They're free. The members and supporters of the CCFR are paying for it. And that's what we have to do. This is a campaign that needs legs, and all you guys have all the legs, right? We only have a few sets over here. So tell your friends to get involved. Go to scrapc21.ca. Tell your gun store to order the posters. Tell your gun club to order the posters, and make sure that they put that stuff up so people can find out what the Liberals did and they're doing, and what they tried to do, which is just as important as what they're doing, right? What they tried to do, the stuff they tried to pull. Really important, especially if an election gets called soon. Okay? Anyway, scrapc21.ca, spread it around. Thanks everyone for your support. Thanks for watching. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.
This is another episode of the CCFR Radio Podcast. Remember, if you don't stand up for your own ability to own and use firearms, who will? Join the CCFR or donate right now at www.firearmrights.ca.